I'll just do a quick bio real quick again. Shane obviously presented for us in February, and he's back again today. Different subject, and so Shane is a certified surveying and engineering technician with Lawson Fisher and Associates. 26 years of experience specializing in all manners of measurement and data collection. Shane is a spearhead. Shane has spearheaded Lawson Fisher's growth in the Northern Indiana surveying market over the past 2 decades and is largely responsible for Lawson Fisher's ability to capture a wide variety of data, process it efficiently, and produce an effective survey deliverable no matter what the given situation is. Shane is a member of ISPLS and NSPS, OSHA Certified 10, Confined Space Certified, as well as trenching and evacuation of United States Patent Inventor, carries a certification from the National Institute of Certification in Engineering Technologies, and has been NSPS Level 3 certified survey technician since 2000, and has been certified a geographic information system professional since 2008. Whew, that's a lot of big words, Shane. I made it.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming back again, and appreciate all your time and effort as always for anybody that presents. So hopefully you got to did you see your character? Did you like your
I
character?
did. I
Yes,
did. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's very
absolutely.
flattering.
That's cool. They do a really good job of creating
Yeah.
them. So
Yes. Yeah.
that's awesome.
Anybody who sees me in real life would probably be startled a little bit. It was good. Okay. Are we ready to roll?
You are good to go. Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. Uh, this is a topic, as far as I'm aware of, in my world over here in the Midwest, it's not talked about a lot. Um, we recognize that there's a lot of variety in what we're doing, and people have different goals that they're trying to achieve. And so this is going to go a little more technical, but we will try to keep it as general on the technical side as we kind of can. And again, from my background, I come heavy in civil engineering surveys, so a lot of topography and control and things like that. And of course, with the topography comes the coding of all these different features. And I'm going to be speaking generally around the Trimble and Civil 3D, Trimble and AutoCAD Civil 3D platforms, because that's what we have been using lately. My hope is that other platforms, Leica and TopCon and whatnot, have similar tools. That's my assumption. So, but we're looking for a discussion here. So, and like I said, I think this is a subject that people aren't typically kind of sharing what they're doing in much detail. And so I have no idea. I might think we have a pretty good system, but you guys can let me know. It maybe is not so great. But we're gonna go through what we do and just hopefully get some discussion about it and look for some input from everybody here. So why are we doing this? Well, again, we realize how important communication is. And this is a big piece of that puzzle, I think. This is getting all of your field data in some organized manner that then can be processed through into some type of a deliverable. That's the general goal. So I figured we would just take a minute, since these are being recorded and we're assuming that people of all different skill levels will be possibly looking at this someday. But in my mind, I want to take a moment and just say out loud what I think the evolution was of field codes, at least from my perspective. So for those who haven't been around for a while and who get a code list and might say, why does this code list, why does this look like this? Where did this come from, or how did this happen? And usually most things are a pretty natural evolution of what their environment they came from. So in my mind, field codes started when you were out doing topography, whether it was cross sections with a level or doing radial topography, you were taking hand notes. Okay. So you would note your setup, and then you would just kind of make up your own codes for your edge of pavement or ground elevation or a manhole. And as long as other people could read your shorthand and you had a system between you and some CAD operator, then you were pretty much good to go. Okay. And so with hand notes, you had some consistency, but I think it probably varied wildly just by what people were doing at the time and what they needed to get done. Okay, so then it progresses and data collectors come along. And so then in general, I think you tended to collect more points. And then maybe a little more focus started to be given to the coding because it was awkward to type into the early data collectors. It wasn't usually too user friendly. So you had some very terse abbreviations, right? And I think that worked pretty good. And most of them, at least what I have seen, I've searched the internet a little bit. I don't find too much, but most of them seem to be the 2 or 3 letter common sense alphabetical, EP is edge of pavement, GL is gutter line, PP is power pole, and so forth. Do we want to pause for a minute? Does anybody else, is this a general consensus? Is how this has evolved? Does anybody else have any comments, some different thoughts?
No, I would say you're pretty much spot on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then it progresses a little further as the collectors get a little more complex. And now you have things like feature libraries where you can, in the office, establish a set library. And this is another step, and it's great. But again, most of those codes had kind of been established, kind of born from the hand notes. And so usually those were a lot of the code systems that were adopted. And again, those are pretty easy. I think they're fairly common in general for a lot of these things. And it served us pretty well. And then also you get things like attributes come in. I assume most people at this point are making full use of their attributes. I suppose I could mention it just for a moment. I just have a software up here that's Feature Definition Manager. It's a Trimble product. I'm assuming all other manufacturers have a similar product to this. And if you're not taking advantage of your attribute features, I would encourage you. For example, if trees, I think is maybe a big one for us, is one of the ones I think is maybe a good example, where it prompts you for size or type and maybe other things. And then we have all the common types of trees in our area. So that will automatically come in. So can I just ask people, do we feel like most people are using the attributes that come with the field codes in these systems? Or are most people, say entering all that information when they take the code? If I had to guess, I would say it varies, but.
I was going to say our personal experience is we don't use the attribute side of it.
Really?
Yeah. We just
okay.
key in a few things and then we're not using attributes, but
if, like I said, my background is heavy in a lot of topography. So if you're doing a lot of topography and you're collecting lots of features, you're looking for ways to make that go as smooth as possible and be as consistent as possible across crews, right? Because what Trent calls a maple, what somebody else, how they might abbreviate it, you'll start to get pretty squirrely pretty quick, okay? So, but this can go on, this whole idea gets expanded too, because you can do it with your line types. As far as fences, you can have a height included. If it's a driveway, you can have an attribute of whether or not it's residential or commercial. Sometimes that's important on DOT projects. Manholes sometimes have ID numbers. So I guess my comment on this general realm of this field code and attribute, if it's something you haven't used, you might not need to. It just depends on your operation. But if you have crews out that are doing a reasonable amount of topography, I would encourage you to look into whatever your software that you're using, its capabilities to have this function. Because the end result would hopefully be, and why you would do it would be, you'd be more consistent. And then it should just make the whole process go easier. Because everything, I think a lot of this stuff just comes down to moments. If you can save moments here and there and get things smoothed out, then you'll start to gain some efficiencies.
Exactly. Jesse's got his hand raised.
Okay, let's hear from Jesse.
Yeah, we're starting to I've been pushing for attributes for a while, ever since the ruling came down that our digital data is now accepted as a form of field notes in a court of law.
Yeah.
Using attributes is a great way of allowing a lot of our up and coming technicians the ability to use the technology in their hand to create field notes, because we just found that writing down on a piece of paper doesn't always work anymore.
Yeah.
So forcing them to use attributes has definitely aided in a lot of our surveys, getting the notes that we need, specifically in monumentation or the other pertinence, fence heights, or anything else needed for altar surveys.
Yes.
So creating digital field notes.
Yeah, it's a powerful tool, and you can also require, well, I'm going to assume that most people's softwares are similar to what I'm using. And most of those attributes you can even control kind of data ranges. So you can usually specify if you want an attribute that is either can be just simply numeric. So if somebody tries to type a word in there, it just will not accept it. You can have attributes that are optional. It means, for example, this is a newer code set I'm looking at, and I'll explain that in a minute. Our older code set for a tree, we included a drip edge dimension, because that would come up once in a while, but it's just not very frequently. So some of those things, they were there if needed, but did not have to be filled in. Other things like, here's a good one, a water surface elevation locations, to automatically have a date and time stamp associated with that. And then you can have a remark field. Ordinary high water marks. So we will list all of our common observation types, because for jobs for permitting, when the engineers go in to analyze this, these are typical questions and things they want to know. So we have all, whether it was a vegetation line, some wall stain, or some other type of common observation we have in our area. So there's lots of ways to use these attributes for some of these things that you would maybe not, come into your mind very quickly. But it's nice because when you have new people come along, in my presentation last time, I talked about how we use college interns each season in the busy season. So having those menus there and just available, it really helps guide a person through and hopefully gets them into the program a bit more quickly. So if you haven't used attributes much, I would strongly encourage that to be considered if you would like. Does anybody have any questions attributes and how they work?
I would say if you, anyway, you can just go through and just create one new one and just kind of show them how we could set it up real quick.
Okay, let's see here if we can.
Yeah.
Again, this is going to be for this. This is for this particular software, but I'm assuming it would maybe be similar.
Yeah, obviously this is Trimble based.
Yeah. So let's say we're going to call this a test. Our code's going to be testy, and then let's create one. I already have one of those. Test. And then for me, so I did a right click here. Again, there's probably 3 ways to do it. But as an example, let's say we wanted to test Trent's mood for the day, and we have a field code for that. I don't know. So we would say his mood, and then list values, description.
Good, better,
optional. Yeah. I was not prepared for this, but I haven't done this in a while. But this is the general thing. You're going to go in, you'll fill out the details about, do you want to require this? Office use only is honestly new since I did this last. I'm not even sure, but okay. Let's say it's optional.
Required will not allow you to push past the next screen.
Right. If you say required, once you, and how it works, I should explain too. See, so this is how out of touch I feel like, at least I am, because in my perspective, I'm thinking a lot of people are using this at this point, but and that could be the case. But anyway, yeah, when you take, let's say you have this mood code or the testa code for testing Trent's mood. And you take that, you put that code in, it recognizes it, you take the shot, and then another menu opens up and it says, okay, his mood, what is his mood? And so I would list the moods.
You
Let's
got to
see if I
add.
can-
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, you got to add
Yeah, let's see if I can.
on the right-hand side.
Oh, here we
There you
go. Here we go. Yeah. So thank you. So it's good, and then it's bad, and so forth, and
There you go.
and you would build your list.
Okay.
So
cool.
this is like how the trees, a list like a trees, and you list the values. And then if you do have something that has a lot of values like trees, and it's a maple or a magnolia or something with an M, you can hit the letter on your controller and it will say jump to the field that has the M's. So this is an example of a list. Numbers are pretty straightforward. It's only going to allow you to put in a number, but it can be a fractional number, right? Integer, obviously a whole number. Text, I think there probably is you can have default values. If you have something very specific in mind, you can say it shouldn't be more than 10 characters. Again, it has a lot of controls to help people stay on the right track and to be consistent across your organization. That would be the whole idea behind this. And then it should smooth out your post-processing as well, because you're getting a much similar data set across the board.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We also have a capacity to do a photo that will trigger an icon that you can click, take a photo. Tremble, I don't understand why they can't make a good camera, but
Exactly.
TSC7 can't, I don't understand. But anyway, if it had a good camera, the TSC7 is what we use. You could take a photo and that would be great. But it's such poor quality and takes so long to load, we stay away from it at this time. Anyway, you can have a date and time stamp, like I said, for things like water surface elevations that are usually sensitive for that. Or it can be control point checks. You want to have that with it. Okay. How are we feeling about attributes in general? Other questions?
Go for it, Josh.
No, I found we used attributes a lot with pipeline work, to where if you're locating a weld, you had stencil information that had to be captured every single time. So if you formatted your FXL file correctly, when you went back in to dump it into CAD to process, everything went to the right layers and looked the way it was supposed to look. And it really streamlined the guessing game of how to spell steak. Is it the steak you eat or the steak you figure out? The various things that just cleaned up the data to where when you're processing from the office side, you don't have the fat-fingered code that doesn't show up. It just goes kind of off into la-la land until you go, hey, wait a minute, there's stuff missing.
Yeah, that's very good. And yeah, I haven't touched on it much, and I don't think we're going to, but obviously too, a part of all this coding is to have this harmony with the office, so whatever your code set is in the field, and people might not know this that have not gotten into this or done it or just beginning. So those of you who are just starting out, your whole idea is that your field code list, all of those codes are married together with some type of CAD support package, so that the idea is you're taking all this data, importing it into some type of drafting software. And it is, if you shoot a tree or a power pole, it's all assigned. It brings in the proper symbols, all in the right layers and all that business, which is a whole nother can of worms. But that's the general idea with that. Okay. Just to cover all the bases. So, and obviously there's work involved, so this takes somebody to sit down and go through all this and create what you want. And obviously it can evolve. I would say, don't feel like you have to get it all correct the first time. You will do a job and you will say, oh, we should have added this attribute. It would be nice if we could make it this way or whatever. And it will be a continual evolution for making all that work. And not too much time, though. I feel like you would probably get something that would be producing a much better product for everybody, field and office alike. Okay. I will, I started to, before I got derailed a little bit there and sidetracked, I started to talk about, you know, the evolution of how these codes happen. Well, now that the technology is kind of where it is, we have, I think 2 years ago, we started on reworking the logic of our field codes. And I will use like some manholes here as an example. Can everybody see my screen still?
Yep,
Right.
you're good. Yep.
Okay. Let me do this, and so you can watch me struggle at the same time. Okay, so but when we started out early on, you know, we had a sanitary manhole. I think it was SNMH, storm manhole STMH, combined sewer manhole CSMH. Okay, and that's fine. That makes sense and all that good stuff. Okay. Well, what we found is now with these newer libraries, you can search not only by the code, which means you kind of need to know the code to be able to search by the code or get close to it, or you can also search by description. So what we found is that for newer people that are less accustomed to our unique terminology, which we all have a little flavor of, we found that the logic was much better for more people to just identify the main feature first. So every manhole is starting with MH. So if you're a newer person and you walk up, yeah, I would hope pretty quickly you would at least learn what a manhole typically looks like. And then you could quickly find that either by searching manhole, because this is the remark as it will be stored, or by the MH. And so we went through, and now we didn't do this for everything because you can just go nutsies trying to apply this logic for everything, but we did it for everything that made, you know, most sense. So inlets, we have all these different style of inlets. Okay. So again, it used to be, we had a behind curb inlet was BCI. Now it's inlet behind curb. This is the logic that we have decided to start adapting, again, because the technology has kind of changed and the way you can search for these things has changed. And then two, we recognized it tended to be easier for newer people to adopt this. Same thing with driveways. You know, in asphalt, we used to have an asphalt, concrete, gravel drive. They all started with the material letter, you know, A, C, or G. Now they all start with it's a driveway, and then it's the type of driveway. So does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, those are great. I like it.
Okay.
And that's obviously, you know, it helps when you got that feature code library where you just start to type in DR and then it starts to populate everything. And
yeah, and that's the huge. So we found that, you know, it used to be you would go out and you would have a laminated card of some kind that you would use that was helpful, and people still might like that. That's fine.
Yep.
We have found with making some of these modifications, it makes it a lot easier to just search and find that within the feature libraries. Again, that requires them, though, obviously, to all be established and set up. But it is nice to tell people, you get somebody started with something and you say, if you're putting in a code and you're not finding a match for it, then it's not a code that we have, and, you know, we need to talk about it. So
that's a great looking list. I like it.
yeah, it's quite long at this point. Plus two, we found, I'll just say a general note for people who've been out there a little longer. You know, everything, it's just kind of like the more, you know, once the surface models started getting better, nobody ever asked for less detail on the surface models. You know, it was like, it just, what's more, you know, what kind of, what is this? And as the corridors become more crowded, then, you know, it used to be, oh, we just have an overhead utility line. You know, now it's heading more towards, okay, what line, you know, what line is it exactly? Anyway, so the general trend from my perspective has been that people are just wanting more information, more detail, because even in this new list, we've accommodated poles that are powered but have a street light on them. You know, it's getting a little nutsies, but by keeping it organized like this, it's not too bad. I will point out too that if you notice these code lists have kind of some unusual suffix additions to them. And we try to let everybody know that's using this data and have established what is being used for creating a surface model. So the little delta symbol or the triangle is what I was kind of shooting for, was an indicator to anybody using these codes that this code was going to be used by default for creating surface models. And that's like established up front. It doesn't mean it's hard and fast. It can be modified, but we're going to start with this as a default. The numeric suffix just means it's a line feature as opposed to just like a symbol. And then the NP is a no plot. So we have some codes that are not going to plot on the plans, but like we have this important information. So it might have the symbol like the eye with the circle with a little eye in it is a typical like information symbol these days. Because we might need to tell the design engineer something important about this particular location. And so we have some specific codes to help convey that information, if that makes sense. So we try to identify all of our codes, you know, what is a point or a feature code, what's a line code, what's used for surface, what's not used for surface, and then what are some of these other codes we have that aren't going to plot, just so there's not much mystery about what these codes are being used for.
I like your CC code, cowboy
cushion. Is that? Yeah, that's probably one of our local terms there. We also have, let's see if I can find it. So this is just a side note, but anybody who's done a lot of topo, you know, there's a tendency to go a little nutsies out there.
Yeah.
So we established this, what we call an off menu codes. So if these are all things that we have found in the field before, and the idea is we'll keep adding to this as oh
my gosh,
as things change, but I don't know. And then we'll make some symbols as we kind of have time and stuff. But anyway, yeah. So if you wanted to add a little variety maybe into your code list and have a little competition of some sorts, that you can make your own off menu code list there.
Did you make a block or a symbol for every one of those?
No, not yet. Not yet. This is
Because
we are still.
I want to see what the sleeping person block looks like.
It's probably going to be like, you know, what you can imagine. I guess it depends on if they're standing up sleeping or if they're laying down. Maybe we need to have two codes for that.
Oh my god,
I've seen both.
That's the best list ever.
So you know, that's not practical at all, but anyway, that is something we've done to help or we're implementing. This list has been in the works. I don't want to I don't want to discourage anybody, but I don't want to fool you into, there's a significant amount of effort that goes into coordinating this with everybody and all that business, all the layers, because again, this goes to all the layers, the symbols and how that's going to work and a lot of things. That's a whole nother job, but I really think once it's done, it is worth the effort. So
yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, it's a dedicated person for a couple of weeks to get this stuff set up. And
yeah. So our general approach is, you know, we work on it when we can. We have a typical slower season because of weather. We get pinned in a little bit at times. So we'll try to take those times and kind of take mental notes over the year and then do this. So anyway.
That is a great list.
Okay. Yeah, so any questions about that or the way those codes are used?
Anybody got questions you want to talk about?
Because it's going to get, what are we shooting for tonight? Is it like, are we shooting for the hour?
It is whatever you want it to be.
Well, Lord have mercy. I'm a little fearful of what, because this next one might be a rabbit hole that we'll see if we can get out of it.
Depends on where you take us. Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So, I feel like, you know, that was the general setup. I'm just taking a minute to collect my mind together and, Okay, one quick, let me show you one quick thing, since people asked about the attributes, is because I kind of had a sample open. Okay, so what happens? So let's say you make a field code library with attributes, okay? Most software platforms that I know of, maybe it's changed recently, but the last time I checked, there wasn't a great tool to just take all of your stuff as it was separated out and import it. And when we import into Civil 3D, it needs to be all of your code and remarks is in one column.
Right.
Is that pretty much similar for everybody? Unless somebody tells me different. I've often wondered, I was like, man, there's a huge leap that could be made here in this realm. So here's pretty much a raw file as it came in. You can see there's points that are missing some data. This is a lot. I don't even know how many points are in this one file. It's a lot. Let's just check. Okay, 10,000 some points. Huh? Okay.
What'd you do after lunch?
Took a nap. This is covering up some of my.
So as I saw on part of those codes, you've got, gas line 1, gas line 2, which tells me you're ready to do the field to finish part of that, right?
Yeah, so this is all, once this is imported, all that's going to go on its proper layers and all that business. And if I didn't, again, I should say some of these things that most of us probably take for granted. When you have numeric codes that you're running in the field, they are often connected by their name commonality. And so they can't have the same name. So you will get ABL as an auxiliary break line that we use, but we should, as we move through this file, I picked a big one because I wanted to have some different examples if it came up. Now I'm regretting that. Let me get down to some. So I've sorted them by code. So if you notice there was a change in the look, I sorted the E column by code so that I could start to work with some of this data. This is what I will typically do. And then let me get to an area that has some, I think trees are a good basic item that get concatenated or kind of put together. Bear with me. Here's a tree. Okay. So for example, on this job, we didn't care about drip edge and we didn't have other things that we cared about, but you see what's happened here. Let's just take this one tree as an example. Here's our field code for tree, right? And since we're using attributes, and how this comes in exactly, you can kind of manipulate. This is how I typically do it. But you see that I have my tree size and my tree type, okay? If we don't know in our place or nobody cares much on the job, we'll say tree. If we do know it, we'll say what it is, okay? So how many people are familiar with concatenating, or is this similar to what a lot of people are doing so far?
I'm going to go with I think so. We're building a library at work, and one of them is a book on trees. And one of the classes we just had at the beginning of February was tree codes, how everybody's doing different ones.
Okay.
So we're on the same page.
Okay. So for us, we need to get all this data into one column. So in Excel, I believe the term is concatenating. It's the and symbol. Anyway, so this formula is very simple. It's basically you start with equal. If people use Excel, I don't know what people are used to, but usually equals in Excel is you're going to give it some formula to work with. And you can do all kinds of nutsy stuff with this if you look into it. But if I want to, start with my field code, I'm going to say equals. I'm going to pick my code, and you'll notice it pulls the cell up. And I want to add to it. So that's the and. I want a space between them. I have to put it in quotations as qualifiers. Okay. And then I pick my second piece of information that I want after I say and again. And then I can keep going if I want to add it again. And then it's all in one column. And so I only do that formula once, okay? So I know this might sound like a lot at first, but once you get used, and if you sort it by code, then that is there. You can copy it and you can paste the values. And now this is just, there's no formula here. It is just the code as you need it to go into your CAD program. And so, there's not, I don't know, I guess it's just, we have a lot of variety, but usually if you group the codes and you need to put the information together, you're writing one formula, and then you can apply that to everything and copy them over, and it's done. If you were real slick, you could probably write a macro and record it to do some of this, but that gets a little tricky. Is there any questions about this, or is this something people do? Am I the only person that does this?
Jen had a good comment on that.
Oh, where's the comment?
In the chat is you could also concatenate by typing equals, concatenate with
Yeah.
parentheses, and then whatever you're going to put together.
Yes. That's good, but I never concatenate. I don't can't even right here. Concant. Yep. So the way I learned the shortcut was the and.
Nice.
Because it's like I want this, and then you can add characters in there. You can add parentheses. You can really get creative. But if somebody wanted to get started with this, I would encourage them just to try it out. And like I said, if you sort it by code, so you have all of your, say, trees together, then it makes this, it speeds it up a little bit. Yeah.
Zach, did you want to say something? You had your hand up and then pulled it back down. Did you want to?
Yeah, I was just gonna say we did ours tree type size for it doesn't really, it's more or less the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're doing right here obviously goes back to kind of the shift that's been happening, and that's surveying by a computer monitor. Really, I mean, you're having to go through and change all of this data rather than the field guy typing it in the collector. So, it's just it's a matter of whether you want.
It's the balance. Yeah, it's the balance between all that, because
exactly.
You got all this work. And I guess it just is a business decision how you want to shift it. Do we want this here? And like I said, somebody who's never seen this before, I understand it seems maybe a bit strange. But if this is something, say, you were practiced in, like, this all comes together pretty quickly, usually. And this is this is a large file.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. It's just, again, it goes, like you say, it's the business decision, whether you want a two-man crew standing around typing 6 extra characters, or you want one guy copying and pasting. So,
yeah. So, yep, that's a decision that people, get to make, and because it's America.
That's right.
Okay. So that was kind of my last little comment, probably on just kind of field codes and stuff. So from there, we're going to get into the stepped offsets a little bit, if that sounds okay with everybody.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's what Zach showed up for.
Okay. So again, I'm going to assume all softwares have the basic functions for controlling your lines and whatnot. And so, I guess if we were to start in the very beginning, it's to start a line. I will just say we have our library set up that every line is designated as a line, and it automatically recognizes it as a line. I believe some people might have to indicate that their code is a line by doing some type of begin command. That's not typically how we practice it, just because we have all the libraries set up. But just so people know, that could be a thing, and you'll have to look at your own softwares for that. But that's probably where to start. The other one is to end a line. And I guess I have this set up here, and we'll try it. Do you see a camera view has changed?
Yep, we're good. We got your overhead.
Okay. So we're just going to start very simple. Let's say you start here for just people who have never done this before. And we're just going to use an EP for edge of pavement. And this is your first shot. And then you walk down this way, and you're gonna end it, right? So you got EP. I'm gonna do this for a space, and then we see the command if we look on the list over here, is end. So a lot of these you can configure how you want them, however you like the terms to be or whatever. You can configure what you want your code, we call them control codes, to be to act upon a line. So this is where it starts. Just very simple. You start and end a line. Okay. And then I guess I should add to this. The next progression is, let's do it like this. Let's say that was EP1. Let me start over again, just thinking that some people might not be, let's do 1. And let's say this is shot number 5. So we have EP1 here, EP1 here. And let's say our shot 2 over here is also an edge of pavement. Okay, let's say this is our road. For people who have not done this before, the typical practice that we would use was we would call this EP2. So these all have the same, say, like layer. This we refer to as the base code, has the same layer qualities and everything when it gets into CAD, but you're naming it something different so that the lines are not connecting. Okay, so these are EP2s. This is an EP2. So in other words, if you started here, then you walked, took your shot 2, 3, 4, and then came back over here to 5 with your EP1, these lines would not connect. Okay. If you happen to boink it up and you call this EP1, right? Here's what would happen. This line would no longer do this. It would go over here and then here. Okay. Okay, so we're starting just real basic.
Yeah, no,
is this making sense to everybody?
Yeah, really good.
Okay, I'm assuming this is the kind of like just the 101.
That's perfect.
So you're typically, we add a numeric suffix. I assume most people are doing something very similar, so that your lines, you don't have to run them all at once, or ridiculous stuff like that.
So you're basically setting it up so that you name the lines as individual lines as simply as possible, and you could run a cross section of a street by running back and forth across. As long as you put the codes in correctly, it's going to draw the brake lines correctly, or the feed lines correctly.
Yep, that's how we typically do it. And we, I know that some software programs have where you can set up a pattern and you will go in that pattern. Okay, and I'm sure for some people that is a benefit, and it will automatically progress to the next code. Okay. We don't do that because the way we do our topography is very, very feature based, and we'll typically, instead of crossing the street a bunch because there's usually traffic and that's taking time, we'll typically try to work sections on one side and then maybe progress another section on the other side. I mean, there's so many, we could go on about all those scenarios, but so we generally will just kind of, keep them named simply. When I work, I will try to pick a direction and work, say, left to right. So I might start with like a sidewalk 1, sidewalk 2, or whatever, brake lines, and kind of keep them in set numbers to help me keep track. So if you're struggling with it, don't bite off more than you can chew. Start small, start simple, and then as you gain confidence and juggling this, then you add to it, if that makes sense.
But at least you have the flexibility to do the collect the data the way that's most efficient, or as you said, safe.
Yes,
because that enters into the problem as well.
Yeah, and I don't know what other softwares are doing, but if you do topography, the Trimble has the measure codes menu that came up a few years back, where you can set it up to store your most common codes that you're using and manipulate them all on kind of one screen. And you also have your control codes are there in a separate sidebar. It's very handy. If you haven't used it, I would encourage you to check it out if you do a lot of this kind of survey. Okay. So that's kind of the basic on some of the line naming. Okay. Again, if people want to cover some of these basic things, please just speak up, because I have no idea what everybody's familiarity is with this. So
Where would you, where do you set this up? As far as from the collector standpoint, or is this the CAD side of things?
Yeah, so if you're looking to do this, I mean, everything is set up. Your collector is set up. So your field software, and then your office software is set up. So I think I have it in this same, just as an example, since you asked.
Yep.
This is a little screen snip right here that we're looking at of the office or the field controller software.
Got it.
These are the control codes in the field controller software. This is the menu for the Civil 3D. This is the Linework code set, they call it.
Yep.
And they're basically mirrored. I will tell you, you can make them both do very similar things because all the line work will draw in real time on your collector. And I'm not sure if, again, I kind of assumed a lot of people were doing that, but if you don't know, if this is all set up, as you are mapping, you will see all of your lines emerge and come to life. And it's very nice because, it used to be, again, for us that have been around, well, first you had nothing except your field notes to look at. Then you usually could look at a map with just nodes on it or points. And so you could just see the points and maybe do some checking that way. Now, if you're drawing topography lines and curbs and walks and all this business and retention walls and whatever it is all being drawn in real time. So again, if you're doing a lot of topography, it's incredibly helpful to, we say, okay, let's do a map check. How's it looking? And you take a moment and kind of look at what you got going on and see if it's making sense.
Yeah, that's where I was thinking this would come in super handy, right? And when you got a parking lot full of islands and hot dog islands and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, right.
You would notice whether you forgot to shoot the east side or the west side or whatever.
Yeah.
If it's going to draw the lines in the collector, I
Yeah.
can see that being super helpful.
So again, it's hard for me. If anybody has any questions or whatever, please just let me know. Because some of this stuff, it's hard to know what people are maybe wondering about unless they ask. So
Danny's got his hand raised. Go for it, Danny.
okay.
So I got a question. If you're working on line work, let's say you're doing curb and you're coming around and you're coming to a place where it ends. Maybe it's going to butt up to a sidewalk, let's say.
Yeah.
Do you combine the codes so they match, or do you just end it short and then just have the CAD guy, stretch it to the other line, so to speak?
We'll do
you know what I'm talking about.
We'll do I know exactly what you're talking about, and we'll do all of those things. And I think if you hang on a minute more, we'll get there.
Okay,
because
cool.
At some point we have this whole stepped offset idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the horizontal vertical offset.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing that's gonna get a lot of that. But I figured we should at least cover start here in the beginning and cover these bases. So yes, okay. I'm a big fan. My general rule of thumb is if you can combine codes, so I guess let's do this. So was it Dan? Dan was talking, Roddick?
Yep.
Okay. So Dan was saying, I believe, and he can stop me at any point. Let's say this is your sidewalk here. This is your sidewalk, and you have a drive approach. Okay, let me draw a road. Here's your road. Here's your sidewalk. You have a drive approach like this. And I think Dan is saying like, okay, this is my edge of pavement one right here, right? And then I have where this driveway, and just to make it simple, we'll just say this is an asphalt drive. And I'm going to use my old field codes because that's what's in my mind the most right now at this moment. Asphalt drive meets the edge of pavement one here. And again, you have this other joining up where the asphalt drive is going to meet the sidewalk. Now, usually from an office surface standpoint, we use we use these lines in a 3D sense to build the surface is our typical practice. I don't know what people are doing, but this is typically what we do. So we want these to be in harmony. We don't want this in a 3D sense. We don't want the sidewalk, pretend like this line is a elevation view. We don't want that driveway line coming in and being like 400ths above the sidewalk or whatever, because there's a broken joint here, right? There's just so much garbage. I don't know.
Right.
So he's saying, do you combine this? And I say, as a rule of thumb, if you can combine and it's not bogging you down too much, then you should do it. Okay. And here's what I've noticed. Some people have plenty of bandwidth to keep all that straight and combine it. It's not a problem for them, that do it more. People that's starting out, it's a little more difficult for them to do some of the combining. Okay. I think as a rule of thumb, at least for me, if you can combine, you should do it, as long as it's not getting you too far into the weeds. Sometimes you can get so caught up in the combining, I have found it can start to slow you down a little bit.
Yeah.
But again, it is shifting that work. You have to have this recognition that if you're not doing it, somebody else will need to do it. I always tend to lean towards moving work to the office, just because I figure it's easier to go to the restroom. It rains less in the office. It's not as hot. All of those, is not as many cars or interesting people talking to you, and dogs and all that stuff. So my general rule of thumb is if you're gonna move some work around, I will tend to move it to the office. And then if that's not working out, then I would encourage those people to come out in the field and try that for a minute, and then see if they work. Anyway,
I love. Can you just for an example, could you write how those blended codes might work? Right. So
yes,
you got EP1 space and then you ran into your asphalt driveway.
Yeah. So if you wanted to combine these,
flip your camera back. Flip your camera back.
Oh, thank you.
There you go.
Yeah, if you want to combine these right here, it's just simply yes. This is my software. I assume others are the same, but it's EP1 and then your driveway code. Okay. And this is called code combining, or if you're working with somebody, like we say, give me a combo, edge of pavement 1, asphalt drive 1. And then when this downloads, those are in harmony. They are touching in a, not only planimetrically 2D, but also in a 3D sense, they're touching. So if you're building surfaces out of this data, which I guess most people are, that's what we do.
Yep.
Then you want that to be done. So if you're not doing it in the field, you're gonna most likely need to do it in the office. Or if you want it to be nice and clean, I suppose. You might not always have to. So it's the same thing here. If you're running along and this is your sidewalk 1, and then you get here, just as another example, this code would be, for example, you could do sidewalk 1 space ADR1, and then it would be end. Ran out of room. And that would end the asphalt drive, but it would allow the sidewalk line to continue running. Cool. And usually you would do the line that if you were going to end a line like this, you would end it last. At least in our software, that's how it works. Okay.
Makes sense. Yep.
So that's a basic example of combining. I guess if we're going to talk about combining, we could cover one more thing real quick. Let's say if out in the street, you have a water valve and you're running your water line. So I don't know what your water line is. Let's say it's WTR 1. When you get here and you want to shoot the valve and the water line, again, for people that don't know, typically the custom is you would shoot whatever the symbolic feature would come first, and then a space, and then your line code. Because when it's imported into the computer, at least our computer program, and it makes sense that most would work this way, that it's going to want to recognize that code and bring that symbol in, and then attach the water line to it. So typically, if you're combining a feature code or something that will be symbolically represented, you would that would come before your line code.
Got it.
So that's just a couple of basic combining examples. Okay, and then I'll give you one more just for. I'll give you a goofy one. Some of this stuff you just start doing for fun because, like I said, after 10,000 shots. you know, you can be running a center line one here, and this is probably good for a lot of utilities, right? And you want to have all of your center lines come together, and you can combine it, you know, with this one shot. This could be center line 1, and then center line, you could call this 2, and this could be center line 3, and then you could run them along, and they would all combine in that one, in this one shot here. And so again, it would just simply be center line 1 space 2 space 3. It's just another basic example. And then sidewalks, you have a lot of weird stuff with sidewalks. So rule of thumb, if you can combine and it's not being too much of a burden to you, I encourage people to do it. If you find that it's slowing you down a bunch, or like, because the more you combine, the more you have to plan ahead, which I think you should do anyway. If you're doing topography, you need to be 2 or 3 shots ahead, is my general idea or rule of thumb. You can't just be shooting what you're looking at. You need to be shooting ahead of you and thinking about it a little bit. The more you combine, the more capacity will need to think ahead. You know, you might have to pause and look at a situation, be like, okay, I'm going to start here, and then I can't shoot this until I bring this back around. You know, so it can get pretty weird. It depends on what you're, again, if you're just shooting a county road with a ditch, you know, none of this matters much. But if you're in an urban setting where you have a lot of this going on, you kind of have to pick and choose your battles sometimes, if that makes sense.
Got it. Devin's got a question. Go for it, Devin.
Okay.
Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Yes.
So quick question. If you're shooting some curb somewhere and you've got a pretty substantial amount of curb that you're doing that's along a curve, how would you go ahead without only doing 3 points, because you're going to need more definition along that curve? What's the best way to get an accurate model of that curb without putting too many points in your drawing?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So that's our stepped offsets thing, and I'm planning on covering that very thing, I believe.
Perfect.
If we can get through this, this is way more exciting than this is great. But I think we're getting there pretty quick. We're going to cover a few more of these basic, I don't know what I call these, kind of like the basic line commands for manipulating your lines. And because then the stepped offsets is like it's wonderful once you pick it. And I think it's a huge time saver. Like the gentleman just was asking about, it can be a huge time saver using it right. But we'll talk about that. There's some things you need to know.
Cool.
Okay. So that's some of your basic lines. I would say the next simple one on this list is probably a circle. It's pretty self-explanatory. I think an example might be in plan view. If we're looking down and you have something like, let's say a can lift station, or a lift station, or something that's maybe 10 feet in diameter. And, your options are, you can shoot some points, that's not a big deal. If that's easy to do, you can do 3 or 4 points on it and draw it that way. Just so people know, though, and sometimes you get in areas with these funky concrete decorative kind of stuff, and you get all these weird circles. You have the circle command available. I think ours is done by the radius. You enter the radius, but if you want a circle to draw from one point, let's say you want to use a concrete pad command, and then again, it's space. You see the command for circle is just CIR, or it's whatever you tell it to be. And then, you put in your dimensions. So if this is 10-foot diameter, it'd be a 5-foot radius, right? And then it will draw that. Now, if your field software does this, I know Trimble does. So again, that's what I'm talking about. But I mean, it will draw it. You'll see it come in. It will draw a circle. And again, with just one shot, which is kind of nice. And then it will have one elevation, which can be easier to clean out. It depends on what you're doing. You have to keep that in mind always, right? Because the reasons vary, but this is an option. Okay.
Got it.
All right.
Zach's got one more question. Go for it, Zach.
Yep.
Yeah. Say how you're doing the circle code there.
Yeah.
I run into that a lot on lift stations, exactly like you're talking about.
Yeah.
Is that only going to benefit CAD if they are using line gen?
So when you say line gen, I assume you're meaning like automated line generation from the
Yes.
field work that's downloaded. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know that there's really a benefit to them. In my mind, this is more for you, if this is convenient for you, because you know as well as I do, right, you have the, you got the person that's, sleeping on here because it's warm,
Right.
I don't know, or you got the tree that's in the way, over here, and you can't, there's just all kinds of reasons you might want to do this. You know what I
Right.
mean?
So it might benefit me more for my notes.
I think so. It's
Okay.
it's less shots and it's one common elevation. But again, it depends on what you're doing because, well, I hate to even mention, I shouldn't even mention this. There is a way that you can also you can offset this.
You got to tell me now.
Okay, all right.
Like-
You could do another
man.
circle. You could do another, you could stay in the same spot and do another circle that was, say, 5/100ths or a 10th outside this circle. So let's say if you made it 5.05, a second one. So you could either,
Flip your
I don't
camera.
think you can combine two circle codes, but you could just do another shot in the same spot. I'm getting excited here, so I'm ready.
Flip
And
your
then just do
flip your
a
camera too.
Okay, all right, hold on.
There you go.
Oh, did it stop
Yeah,
working?
no, you're good. You're good. You're good.
Oh, is it? It's not showing up.
No, you were good.
Oh,
You're good. There you go.
okay. On my screen, it stopped showing up.
All right.
That's
well,
going to be difficult. Anyway, you could make a slightly larger radius
Right.
and then have essentially then another circle if you wanted, say, a ground elevation.
Uh-huh.
Because sometimes they want to include this in the surface, sometimes they don't. It depends on what they're doing. I'm just giving you some
Right.
possibilities that you can work with.
See, like
that-
generally, if we were doing that, say I got that shot and I drew a circle code in there, say
Yeah,
it's topo. I also saying that's an elevated lift station or
yeah,
that exact thing you're drawing. I need some ground shots around it because they're going to use brake lines.
yes. And it just
So-
depends on what level you're going for. So if it's
Okay.
rough and tumble, I'm just saying, and it's generally, say, 2 feet above grade,
Mm-hmm.
you could pop in another line that would cover the whole thing with 2 shots, if that will facilitate the requirements of the project. But if the
Right.
ground's not level, you obviously have to consider these things. If the ground's very unlevel, then that's not going to work because you're creating some quick generalizations,
Right. I always shoot more if I don't. If
Yes,
it's
right.
unlevel like
Yeah.
shoot 6 shots around it. I don't know. It's
Sure.
whatever. It may be
Yeah.
too much, but they got absolutely everything they need, and I don't have to go back.
Well, like I said, nobody's asking for less data these days, typically.
That's the truth. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate
Okay.
that.
You're welcome. Okay, so that's a circle. That's probably one of the next most basic things. And again, you can use that for just, a lot of different things. Okay, the rectangle is super handy because of, I don't know, so many concrete pads. Is it on the correct camera?
Yes, you're good. Yeah, I was gonna say this is perfect for power vaults and that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yes, you just have so many things. Okay, and this is one of the things. So this command is as it's set up here. And again, you can control what it's called. It's up to you. Whatever you want it to be. This is where Trimble and Civil 3D, the process is a bit different. In fact, I think I have it here. It says rectangle is first point up. So if this is a 5-foot rectangle this way, and you're going to shoot this dimension, and let's just say this is again, just a concrete pad. This first code, I should have wrote it down here. Can you see this still?
Yeah, you're good.
Rectangle. And then at this point, you can give it the dimension. I should also tell you that Trimble requires a space between the command code and the dimension. Civil 3D does not. I don't want to muddy this too much, but it is one of the small differences. And then Civil 3D, the rectangle goes at the end. It's on the second shot. Trimble, it's the first. Why they diverged in this small way, I do not know, but they did. I will typically draw it in the field so I can see it. And then it's just in the office, it's a matter of all the rectangles get moved a position. Anyway, If you shoot your code, whatever it is, and you give it the dimension, when you take the second shot will just be the straight code. And then it will draw that rectangle for you. So again, things to keep in mind, if this rectangle, if it's sloped, if we're looking at it in a elevation view now, if it's sloped, you have to make sure you're understanding that whatever these elevations are, this could be sloped one way or the other, but these elevations will reflect their kind of parent elevations. Does that make sense?
It does. Yep.
So you just have to be aware of that. A lot of times these pads are pretty level, and I don't think anybody cares that this is maybe 500ths lower than the front. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times it's either staying or it's going for a lot of this stuff. But that's the rectangle command. The other way to do it is you can shoot the same thing, leave off the dimension, and take 3 shots. So you would shoot it here, here, and here, and it will create the rectangle. So again, that's just up to you. If you find you have a lot of these and they're all the same measurement, you don't have to measure it, maybe you do it the dimension way and you just 2 shots. If it's something you're not doing too much, you can do 3 shots, makes a nice rectangle. So again, for those doing a lot of topo, that's a nice little time saver. Yep. Any questions on rectangles? Okay.
I think you're good.
Okay. Okay, next we're going to do extend is a real easy one. This one is less common, I would say. And here's the example. You have a fence. And again, you have some obstacle between you and the fence corner. So you can do offset, you can do all your offsets and other stuff too. That's fine. And that might work. But if you have these long straight tangents and you can shoot here and here, and then the next time you can get a shot is here, okay? But you cannot see this for whatever reason. This is your first, second, third shot. I can't see my camera, so if I'm getting off, you're gonna have to tell me.
No, you're good.
Okay, so this is a chain link fence. This would be chain link fence. And again, you would just do the space. Your command that we have set up for this is an X, and then your dimension. So you would just measure from here to here. Let's just say it's 10 feet. You put in your 10 feet, and then you can go over here and you can stop your fence. So chain link fence one end, and it will put this point in at an extension of this line. So based upon the sequence of your shots, it will extend that line along this same bearing and put the corner in. So sometimes you have a sidewalk going up to a house or something and you just can't see it and you're like, man, I just need like 5 more feet, So you can use this extend command to push out a feature or something that you just can't quite get, but you need to. That's where the extend command can come in handy. Okay. Any questions on that?
Go for it, Zach.
Yeah, sorry.
No.
That seems like a really useful tool.
Yeah.
That happens a lot in the field, and we end up taking a shot and pulling a tape over from it and noting that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there maybe an instance where I could use that on a boundary? Say, no, I'm not saying hold. I'm not saying for setting property corners. I'm not saying that. I just need a rough calc to get into the area. Could I manipulate that in a similar way?
Yeah, but I would say if you're wanting to use something like real time in the field in your controller and manipulate that and stake out and work off of it, I would almost be inclined to calculate a point by bearing or something. That's what be my suggestion. This extend command is probably better confined to the what I just described world. That would be my opinion, because if I calc something, I might want to have a point there for reference. This will not create a technical point. So that would be, I would probably lean towards calculating some type of an offset based on an angle or a bearing.
Okay.
But you can you can play with it. Nothing,
I kind of want to, because
Yeah.
it would probably be just as fast to turn 180 degrees down a line and go a distance. This is kind of a new thing, and
Yeah.
it seemed, I just wondered if I could play with it in a similar kind of way. I'm
yeah,
gonna try it.
I ain't gonna stop you.
It's not gonna hurt, I don't think.
Hey, I think experiment is, that's
Okay.
that's a great tool. So yeah, knock yourself out. Okay. Now, extend rectangle. Oh, Lord have mercy. There's this this turn a line down here. Again, this is one that can get a little wonky, but you can extend a line and actually you can start turning it. This doesn't happen very often, but if you have a fence situation or a building, maybe that's doing something like this, and you can shoot here and here, some of this stuff you're going to have to explore on your own, or you can contact me later. I put my email here if those of you are interested, because we're going to have to start speeding up for time. But you can also do a command with that right turn by doing either negative or positive values to actually make a couple of turns. If you can shoot a couple of shots, you could have your code here. Let's say this is a building. I believe it would be right. If we were shooting this direction and we want to go this way, it would be left, and you could go 5 feet. And then you could repeat that and go right and go like 10 feet, and it would actually draw these other lines in. There's also some other menus that can do this that might be a little easier, because this can get long quick, but I just let you guys know that it's there. And I would encourage anybody interested in this to just, do some experimenting, because until you can do that and start seeing yourself, some of this is kind of hard to explain. Okay. Any questions on that? I'm going to do the pointed curve thing, because I'll show you something. Well, geez, the questions here. Let's start with a simple one, and then we'll make it a little trickier. Okay, so if you're running through a tangent, let's say this is a tangent section, right? I think this is pretty straightforward. You're coming into a curve. This is going to be your whatever, gutter line 1, and this is your pointed curve. And again, this depends on the way that you're running, okay? Then you will typically have somewhere mid-curve, and you need to keep this fairly balanced. Whatever your distance was here needs to be about your distance here. This would usually go back to your default base code, and then this is your pointed tangent, okay? That's the basic curve. What people don't tell you is when you get these like multiple radiuses, so you have one curve here that's one radius and then goes into something goofy. You see it in the parking lots a lot. Let's pretend like this is a curve. So this would be your pointed curve. And then if this, let's say this is another curve, this section right here at a different radius. Okay, are you with me? You would go here, and whatever your base code is, let's say it's got a line. Then you would just say pointed tangent, space pointed curve, and it will start a new radius for this curve. And then you can shoot it, and you can actually just do that again. If you get here, this can be another pointed tangent, pointed curve, and then carry on, and then your pointed tangent end. And because what you'll find if you don't treat your curves with care and keep these dimensions evenly spaced, in the big curves, you might have to add some additional points. If it's real big, usually I'll just come up with a consistent pace. Anyway, and these are just base codes, anything in between here, and it will arc it. And then when you get out here, you can straighten it out. Okay. But if you're not treating this with care, you'll get these, you'll get the curves that do this. Everybody had that happen to them, right? Because you didn't treat your curve right. And then you got this bulge. It's painful. Okay. Any questions about?
Did that help you? Did that help you, Devin? I think that was kind of what you were looking for, multiple points on a curve.
Well,
yeah, totally. That's what I was mostly asking about.
Okay.
Yeah, I know, like we do it a lot with the ADAs, right? When you get to those ADA ramps and that kind of stuff. So shoot back of curbs and then face of curbs for the ADA ramps and all that stuff. So
yeah, and I wasn't sure how many people did the whole, the different curves into different curves. That's how we do it. There's probably some other ways to do it. But typically that's how we do it. And typically most curves, you can get away with just the 3 shots, the pointed curves, a middle and a tangent on a lot of them.
Some of the reason Devin was asking that question is to bring clarity, because we bounce a lot back and forth between traditional topography using AutoCAD as our platform and topography using MicroStation as our platform. And MicroStation allows us to take 100 points along a curve using one begin curve point and one end of curve point.
Yeah.
And so I think he was looking for clarity on kind of what others are doing in the AutoCAD realm.
Yeah, so I'm not a MicroStation user, so I can't speak to it. So that's the typical kind of method that we're using. And yeah, so we're typically not taking a lot of shots along a curve unless there's some strange reason that we need to. On curve, honestly, I don't use that one much. But I think you can avoid shooting the pointed curve and pointed tangent. I honestly never use it. So I won't speak on it much. Okay, now that's the basic code. So I guess we'll get into this stepped offset business, because this is probably some of the biggest gains you can see. And I will say it again, when you're doing any type of offsets, you need to understand what your elevations are doing. And it's just much more important when you get into the stepped offsets that you're using it in an appropriate way. And that just varies depending on the job. Okay. Can I move this here? The instructions from Civil 3D on stepped offsets are pretty much horrible. And I had to go out and just hammer it out to even start to understand what they were talking about, because it was pretty confusing when I looked in some of the documentation. So, I mean, I think there is some benefit there to it, but I didn't find it ultra helpful. So we'll start really simple with this. Yep.
Will you throw that? Yeah, I was going to say, will you throw that link in the chat real quick?
Let's see here. Yeah. And this is not, I don't even know if, where do I get to the, probably up here. Where do I get to the chat? I don't even
right at the bottom where you shared your screen. There's a little chat button right in the middle.
Is there?
Oh, no, you're probably at the top now. So it'll be yours where it says you'll have like a red and a green thing. It'll drop down on the menu.
You can do Alt H also.
Okay, let me try that because I'm not seeing it.
That's a good one.
Oh. Boring. Okay, I'll move this over so it's here. Okay, anyway. That link is technically, I was looking around at some different things. That link is technically to, is this it? Yeah, this might be it. I don't know. It's taken too much time to determine.
Sorry.
Let's start real simple. That's okay. Let's start real simple. We're going to start with just the horizontal one. Okay. And I would say the first thing to remember again is that whatever your, let's say this is your parent line or your baseline, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Whatever elevation this is going to be, your other line is going to be relating to it. Okay. So let's start real simple. Let's say you don't care about differences in elevation between these two entities. Let's say it's a railroad track. Okay. So let's say this is a railroad track and you don't want to shoot both lines because they're parallel. Most of the track, the gauge in our area, I think it's somewhere around 4.95 feet between them. It's somewhere between that and 9.7 from center rail to center rail. Anybody who does a lot of railroad stuff is probably going to get upset at me for doing this, but if I, if the rail this is going to be comical. What does the rail typically looks like? So, no, that's not good. There's no way I can draw this without this being terrible. Hold on. Just to make this clear. Doesn't rail typically look something like this, right? Just to be clear, I'm typically, let's say for topo.
No.
We're doing center rail to center rail.
No, for railroads are measured inside rail.
I know.
4.71 feet.
I know. I told you there's going to be a railroad guy out there that's going to get triggered. But let's say from a topo standpoint, we're going to be running a jack and bore under this rail, and they need to know clearance. So I want the elevation on top of the rail, okay, which is very hard to get shooting the exact edge because let's just say I don't care about the exact alignment, okay? The rail was probably the worst example I could have done. But anyway, I apologize to the railroad people that know all their stuff. But how this would work is you start here again. The elevation is going to be mirrored from whatever the parent line is, and the offsets are related to the direction that you're shooting it. So if this is your first point, this is your second point, you're going this way, this offset will be positive. So this is just simply railroad, your code for railroad. Let's say it's that. Typically lines have numeric suffix, and then your horizontal offset, and it's 4.95. If it's Trimble, there's a space. If it's just for Civil 3D, there's no space. But the idea is the same. You have your base code, a space. You're going to tell the program you want to do a horizontal offset, and it's a positive 495. So you'll shoot this point, and then as soon as you shoot this point, it's the same exact code. You'll see both lines will appear. Okay? And that is the basic offset. So a railroad, I think, is a decent example if that's the way that you're concerned about it. If you do you're shooting the inside of the rail or you're splitting the rail, but again, that's probably something much more precise you're doing. But you could do that as well. We're going to stick with just a couple simple examples. Another one is, let's just say there's a gravel drive going through somebody's property. And this is more maybe a location for some boundary survey, and they just want a general what's out there, and you don't have a good aerial or whatever. And so they have this loosely defined gravel path that's basically 9 foot wide on average. Same thing. Let's do it a negative one this way. If you're shooting here, 3, this is the sequence that you're following. You want to offset this way. It's just your gravel drive shot. Space, your horizontal offset, this would be a negative 9.0. So as you go along, it's going to draw a 9 foot line parallel to this one to your left. And the left and right, again, is decided by the sequence that you are going. Does that make sense?
Yep, it sure does.
Okay.
I'll tell you, I used to work for the local power company, and that's how we used to drive all the power line roads.
Yes.
Drive one side.
Yeah,
And,
I've set it, the antenna on the truck.
Exactly. Yep.
And done continuous topo.
Yep.
And do these offsets like this. There's all kinds of things. Hedgerows.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anything, that you just have all kinds of basic things you might want to shoot that this is handy for.
It's really good for cell tower access roads, that kind of stuff as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Any of that kind of basic stuff, you just kind of need its footprint.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll do one more with the road. You can do the center of it. Let's say you have a gravel road. I've done this before way out in the county, and we had a gravel road, and they wanted a profile and width of it. But again, this is not, these are not like firm dimensions, this varies. So we go through sample a few places, and we would decide, okay, this is about 10 feet, more or less on each side. Set up your antenna to drive the road on the center line. Okay, so if you want, you can offset both sides at the same time. Okay. And this code would simply be, you're just going to put them both in. If you're shooting center line, you do your offset. One would be negative, and then you just repeat it. And then the other one would be positive. you shoot this one line and it draws both of the lines in at the same time. Okay. So you can also shoot the center of something and go each way if you want. Does that make sense? We all
Yep.
good? Okay. Do people use stepped offsets a lot? Like from the coding, what's the, no?
I'm starting to.
Mhm. Okay.
Ran a lot on access roads for gathering systems. I just finished 60 miles worth doing that, running center line.
Yeah, it's a lot of roads. It's a lot of road work. Okay, so that's probably in my mind, that's kind of like the basic, you know, because you're not so concerned with elevation and stuff like that. It's kind of more location. So let's add an elevation component. And I think a good example to start with is a walk. So again, here is your road out here. This is your sidewalk. And let's say you know they're going to do a road improvement and remove this sidewalk. It's going away. So, you know, people are interested in its current dimension, but not a lot. They are very interested in the back of walk because that's generally going to be a pretty fixed tie-in point in a real urban area. Okay. So you want to add a horizontal and vertical component to this walk. So let's say the walk is 5 foot, a 5 foot sidewalk. Okay. And you're running this way is your progression. So you have 1, 2, 3. Most sidewalks in our area have a cross slope of 2%. And we have accepted that we're okay with letting this line float a little bit because not much is touching it. Again, this is where you really have to be conscious and aware of what is important on your project and recognize the benefits and then the possible setbacks to using this. Okay. Again, this is all going to start. You're going to see these patterns. So this would just be your back of walk 1. Usually you'll do your horizontal. In this case, it's a negative because we want it to go to the left of this line because we're going this way. So it's a negative 5 feet, a space, and then your vertical. Typically the walk right is going to slope towards the road. So we want it to drop the elevation. 2%, 5 should be about 1/10. So it will produce this line parallel 5 feet and 1/10 lower than whatever the elevation is here. Okay. That makes sense?
And when you bring that into CAD, obviously it's elevated, ready to go.
Everything's elevated and ready to go.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of this, I just can't emphasize enough. It just being aware of what this is doing, because you know, there's times it's very appropriate and will save you lots of shooting. But then there's other times, depending on what you're tying into, that it's just not appropriate to do, or you have too much variation or something like that is happening. So you really need to know what you're doing, when to use it, when not to use it. Okay. But if you find those right times to use it, it is saving you loads of shot if you're doing a big topography job. Same thing with a lot of those carriage walks. This will be a good example. So you have this sidewalk coming along. I'm going to call this a carriage walk, carrying you from the road to the main sidewalk and then usually up to the house.
Flip your camera.
Okay.
There you go.
So here's the sidewalk, the main sidewalk here. I'm calling these carriage walks. That's getting you from the road across, usually like some tree lawn here, and then to the home, right? So if you're shooting offsets on this, and again, it just depends on what your appetite for a little movement is. But these carriage walks, they're usually like maybe 2 to 3 feet. But again, you can use your offsets to shoot this here. And you're doing half the amount of shots, but you are creating, you know, these will need to be tied up or cleaned up. You know, these contact points will need to be cleaned up in the office. Okay. So, you know, some people might be a little office heavy. Some people, it just depends on, I'm not telling you what to do here. Just that this is an option. This is available. This can save you lots of shots, but it does, you know, will produce some loose ends that will need to be snapped at some point to make that work. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Now, for us, usually the biggest time saver with this is with curb. Okay. So elevation view of curb. And then we got roll curb and all this other business. But here's our road. This is our gutter line. This is our face of curb. You know, face, top, and back, right? I don't know. I feel like a common practice, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. A common practice is, you know, you'll shoot the gutter in the back, which is fine. And then when that surfaces, you know, it kind of cuts it off. Some people don't care. That's good enough for them. A lot of what we're doing, we're finding that the engineers want to see this. We call this the reveal. They want to know what the reveal is and all this business. We find that a lot of these jobs, the curb is fairly standard in an area. Not always. And again, this, you just have to be aware of it. Let me exaggerate this a bit more because this is maybe what it's kind of like a bit more. Okay. So this will typically be your baseline. And again, if we look at this in a plan view, so we're looking straight down at it, you know, we're going to call this the gutter line right here. This is our gutter line. This is our face of curb that typically doesn't plot. But if you want your surface to kind of include this, and that's going to be analyzed as part of it, you do want it to be in there, at least as a break line, right? And then typically you have everything is going to be referenced to this baseline. All your dimensions will go from this. It doesn't carry on like from here to here. All the dimensions will be from this baseline point. That's a good thing to remember. So this code here, let's say typically it would maybe be a gutter line 1. You're usually going to start with your horizontal offset first. And let's say we're running this way, so they're going to be positive. I find oftentimes this dimension here is maybe about 5/100ths of a foot. So we're going to reflect that here. And again, you can't surface, if this is a 0 horizontal offset, that's not going to surface very well. It needs to be at least 100th. Even that might give you trouble. So this needs to have some dimension to it. And then you'll give it your vertical component. So let's say it's a 6-inch curb. So it's going to go from whatever the gutter is, it's going to go up 6 inches. And then if this is a 6-inch curb, more or less, and again, you'll kind of measure it, you know, then you do your next horizontal. Let's say this itself is 6 inches right here. So we'll call this 5.5, which is getting us this 5/100ths here and the 1/2 foot there. And then once you put a vertical component in, it will carry that through, at least from Civil 3D's perspective, it will carry that through until you tell it to change it. Okay.
So can you make a code with all of that information?
Yeah. So here's what we've done.
That just seems like a lot of typing.
Well, here's the thing. We don't type it.
Right.
We don't type this. So here's a couple things we've done. In our field database, we have our common, you know, 6-inch curb left, 6-inch curb right. We kind of have a common, what we come across, 4-foot walk, 5-foot walk. We kind of have this offset list. Okay. You can also, with the new controllers that are now Windows-based controllers, you know, you can have even a notepad file for everybody or a PDF that has the common offsets that can be copied and pasted. Because usually what we find is once you get to a site, that site will have some typical style curb, whether it's the box curb like this, or it's a roll curb, which you'll start to save some more time with as the more complex the curb it is, if it's consistent. So yeah, we're not typing this stuff in. We kind of have our set kind of template. Those codes are part of our attribute library system, and they're in our measure code screen. And so we'll have our common offset codes there and available for us to use. Because yes, nobody wants to, you're not going to be typing all this in. And I think that's part of why maybe in the past, until some of these newer improvements came along with the controllers and the ability to have more of this stored and copy and paste a little easier, it was a little tougher to do. Okay.
Yep. Makes sense.
Now I'll go back to this one and address, like in our area around Chicago, like curbs are a big deal because they're like mandated because for their flood, part of their flood program and all this stuff. So people, you obviously, this is your most precise location, right? And you are modeling this in the field real time, and you just have to understand and just decide if that's acceptable for what you're wanting to do. The advantages is this takes away a lot of the cleanup, because when you would shoot, if you were to shoot these two manually, as well as I do, right, that unless you're really John Wayne quality with your shots, these are going to start weaving back and forth over each other.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And then that's, you're cleaning up that crap and all this business too. So this is consistent and it's clean. And again, some of these areas, the curb's going to go out, like they're going to remove it, but they still want to verify this reveal and all this other business, or they just want the surface to look good. So I think a lot of jobs you have room to do this modeling, and it's just completely acceptable. Other options are, I don't recommend this terribly, but I mean, you could shoot this. If this curb, it's very common for this to be very overgrown. Shoot, we get a lot of areas. There might be 4 inches of soil on this. I'm not even exaggerating. They still want to know it's there, but if you at least do a couple of spots throughout your project and say, hey, this is typically 6-inch curb, 8-inch curb, you could do this the other way too. If the gutter line is not as important, it typically is the most important. But if it's not for some reason, and whatever the strange reason is, you really are interested in this curb, you can go back this way and put your gutter in and your back in if the face is the most obvious one.
Got it.
Or the top face. You know what I mean? So there's options, there's things you can do. You could shoot the gutter in the face and then just offset for the back, so you're running these 2 lines and then you're offsetting this.
Perfect.
It's just whatever.
Okay.
It's just more like being an awareness that this is there and available to use if you want.
Perfect. Yep. George had a question.
Okay.
Okay, so using that as a guideline, the other controlling factor on curbs is the lip of the gutter.
Yep.
Or the front face of the pan, if you will.
Yeah.
So you could use the same offset procedure to provide that based on the flow line as well, and set it up the same way, I would assume. Could you not?
Yes, you absolutely could. You can. I've done Jersey crash walls. You can go nuts. You have to take a minute and set up your one offsets. You have to set up your offsets. Or again, I have kind of a library of common offsets that I will pull into projects per area. So once you've kind of done it, there's not a lot of this setting up. But yes, if you have what you're talking about, if you have your your pavements coming in, and then you have this, concrete pan. This is typically maybe a foot. Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yep.
This is your roadway. So here's your cars over here. Here's your concrete pan, and then sometimes you have this roll, kind of business. You could even shoot your flow line. If you measure this, what I would usually do is take a couple of check shots, inverse between them, see what my slope is, and decide if I'm good to go. But you could run this here, offset, this way, and get this edge, and do this over here.
Yeah. Typically,
or you could do this. It just depends on what's important to your project.
Typically, our gutters here have either a 1 foot or a 2 foot pan out to an AC roadway. The 2 foot pan has about a 1 inch fall in that 2 feet.
Yeah.
Pretty easy to set up, and everything is based off the curb generally, because everything is staked off the top of the back curb. So that really controls everything, pavement wise and everything else in the end.
yeah, in many cases, like I said, there's all kinds of things that happen, and that's why you just need to know what's going on. But yeah, you might decide that this is your important thing, and you can build this curb out. And so literally, you're going down the road. So now in a plan view, you have this edge, and then you have your gutter, which you probably will plot. You'll have some type of controlling face, which won't plot usually because it's too busy. And then you'll have your back of curb, all that can be produced off of, taking these shots out here, and all this is being drawn. But again, there's times to do this, and there's times not to do it. I find that the more consistent an area is, the more it lends itself to doing this. The more variances you have, and you start to then you're messing around with it too much, then you've obviously crossed over a line and you don't want to go back. There's one other thing though you should be aware of, is that now if I'm standing in the road looking at the curb, so this is my gutter line, this is, oh dog, this is my gutter line, this is my top of curb, and then you have a dub down, right, for your driveway or sidewalk. So the top of curb comes down and it basically meets the gutter more or less. If you have your shots here, and this is a 6-inch curb, you can change your vertical component here, and it will dub it down for you. So if this over here is your gutter line 1, and you have your offset, this is, a lot to, I can't copy and paste here. I'll just do the vertical is 6 inches at this point, right here, 6-inch rise. If you go over here and your reveal is now your vertical is, let's say it's a couple hundredths, you literally just change your vertical, and then it will actually do this, and it will do the back of curb and everything too. You get to the other side of the drive, and if you have a shot here, let's just pretend we're going back this other way now, you can raise it back up, and it will lift it back up in 3 dimensions, and it will flow together. This is how Civil 3D works anyway.
Nice.
So again, if you have those dub downs, so you have 6-inch curb and it typically goes down, and you just have those, you're not keying them in, you're just clicking them, it's applying them to your program, and you're moving through. Again, I know if people have not used this, it sounds like a lot, but if you can kind of incorporate it, especially with topography, then you're talking about saving literally hundreds, if not thousands of shots on a job, and potentially ending up with something better in the end. Now, that doesn't mean there's not some other cleanup that has to happen, because the common one is plan. I'm doing it. Plan view. You have your curb, coming around, and you have your sidewalk, is meeting up with your curb at these locations. If you're running this off of a template, obviously these are never going to meet. They'll be right close. It'll be, it's going to look something like this, but there will be a disconnect that will exist here that will have to be resolved. I've often wished they would have I could pick a baseline and say snap every line within a 1/10 proximity to it, but best that I know, that doesn't exist at this moment.
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
That would be a good one.
As George says, work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
There you go.
So yeah, there's a lot other thing. Like I said, I've done a Jersey wall before. Sometimes you just do one aspect of something. And again, I think there's a big place for us in the topography world, but there's also places for it, like you said, with doing gravel roads or farm roads in places, or other basic things. Anything that's pretty consistent, you have these tools to work with.
Exactly.
And you can see it real time in the field if you have your feature attribute library set up for it.
Yeah, we'll have to play with that one. I like that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm exhausted.
that was good.
So that's pretty much, that's pretty much it. So now if anybody has a few questions, or like I said, reach out to me if you want to. I'm Turay at lawson-fisher.com.
Yeah, and I'll throw that in the follow-up email as well. Danny unmuted himself. He's ready.
Okay.
was just gonna make a comparison. I just started at a firm where we were using Carlson, and one of the differences I noticed, I just came from using Trimble products. So Carlson, when you begin lines and end lines, or if you're doing stepped offsets, they have kind of like a CAD based. You can just select the window to begin a curve or begin a line and end a line, and it numbers the way they do codes. They have codes for specific features or lines or whatnot, and it'll create a new. It'll add a number 1 to that code, or number 10 or 20, depending on how that's done. I think you can do that in Trimble Access, but the place I worked at before didn't really do that. We had to manually do it.
Yeah.
I think there's a way of doing it in Trimble Access.
With the measure codes, you can have, I'm pretty sure you can set up codes to like increase their numeric suffix, whether or not you even use the base code. Plus, one important thing I didn't mention, when you're running in Trimble, it wants the offset with every, so let's say you start that curve, every time you shoot it, it wants to see that offset in Trimble. Now, if you're not processing in Trimble and you don't care about seeing that in the field, Civil 3D only requires that when you start that line, it has that offset and it will apply it to every shot. So let's say you have a gutter line with all of your offsets to build it for that first shot. If you shoot the same gutter line 1 again, or whatever it was called, it will carry that offset on until you tell it to stop. That's what the stop stepped offset code is here, which is actually superior to Trimble because that just makes it a lot more, it's much more appetizing than to have to put that code on it each time. So again, it just depends on, you can code it straight for Civil 3D and let a few things slide with what you see in the field, and you'll still see probably 90% of it. Or you can code for Trimble, because some people might just use Business Center for what they do. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So like with anything, there's lots of different options and stuff. But with this, I just wanted to show some of the basic things and introduce some people to the some of these ideas of this.
No, it was great. That was good.